Start small, a dull ache on one side of your jaw. When you chew something cold, you ignore it. Because what else are you going to do? It's 10,000 years ago. Over the next few weeks, it stops being dull. It becomes a pulse, a heartbeat in your face, keeping time with the actual heartbeat in your chest. You can't sleep on that side. You can't chew on that side. Then one morning, your cheek is swollen. The skin is hot, and the pain has stopped being in your tooth and started being on your entire skull. There's no dentist, there's no painkiller, there's no version of this where somebody makes it stop. And here's the part people don't realize. This isn't just agony, this is how you die. So, what did people actually do? Let's start with what's happening inside your face. A tooth isn't a rock, it looks like one, but it's a shell. Under the enamel, there's a softer layer called dentin, and under that, there's a chamber, and in that chamber is the pulp, living tissue, blood vessels, and nerves, sealed inside bone. Now imagine bacteria get into the enamel. They eat downward through the dentin and eventually they reach the pulp. The pulp gets infected. It swells, but it can't swell because it's inside a sealed box made of your own tooth. The pressure has nowhere to go and it presses directly on the nerve. That's the pain. It's not a cut, it's not a bruise, it's nerve being crushed inside a container it can't escape. 24 hours a day for weeks. Then it gets worse. The infection eats through the bottom of your tooth root into the jawbone. That's an abscess, and now you've got a pocket of pus expanding inside your face. It will keep expanding until it finds a way out. Sometimes it drains into your mouth, which is disgusting but survivable. Sometimes it drains downward into your neck and swells up your throat shut. Sometimes it gets into the bloodstream and spreads. For most of human history, a bad tooth wasn't a bad week. It was a coin flip. Whether you die or you survive. In London, right up into the 1700s, when officials wrote down what people died of, teeth were on the list. An actual listed cause of death, sitting there in the records alongside fever and childbirth. Difficult to imagine, right? Just teeth. So here's the assumption almost everyone has. Ancient people didn't have this problem because ancient people didn't have sugar, no candy, no bread, no soda, no cavities, perfect prehistoric teeth. That assumption is wrong, and there's one side that destroys it completely. In a cave in northern Morocco called Grotte des Pigeons, near a village called Teforelt, there's what may be the oldest cemetery in North Africa. Researchers led by Louise Humphrey excavated the human remains buried there, dating to between 15 and 13,000 years ago. That is thousands of years before agriculture, before farming, before bread, before anything you'd recognize as processed food. These were hunter-gatherers. She examined more than 50 individuals. 94% of them had serious tooth decay. Just over half of all the adult teeth at the site had cavities. To put that in perspective, the rate is comparable to modern industrialized populations eating refined sugar and processed cereal. And this was 15,000 years ago. The cause was sitting right there in the same cave. Charred plant remains, 22 different species, and the most common one was sweet acorn and pine nuts, harvested in bulk, stored in baskets, and probably cooked by dropping fire-heated stones into water. Acorns are loaded with fermentable carbohydrate. The carbohydrate sticks to your teeth, feeds the bacteria already living in your mouth, and those bacteria produce acid that dissolves enamel. The mouth doesn't care whether the sugar came from a candy bar or an oak tree. It's the same chemistry. So no, ancient people did not have perfect teeth. Some of them had mouths full of abscess and exposed roots. Thousands of years before anybody planted a single seed, which means the toothache is not a modern problem. It's one of the oldest problems we have, and we started trying to solve it very long time ago. The earliest attempts are small and strange and easy to miss. On Neanderthal teeth going back tens of thousands of years, there are grooves, worn channels along the sides of the teeth right at the gum line, in the exact spot and shape you'd get from repeatedly pushing something thin into a sore gap. Toothpicks, bits of bone or grass stem or twig used over and over on the same painful spot for long enough to physically wear a groove into the enamel. That's not grooming. Nobody wears a groove in their own tooth for cosmetic reasons. That's somebody with an inflamed gum poking at it, trying to get relief day after day. And then there's one specific individual, and this is the one that stays with me. In a cave called El Cedron in northern Spain, researchers recovered Neanderthal remains between about 47 and 50,000 years old. One of them was a male with a dental abscess. You can see it in the jawbone, a hole in the bone where the infection ate through. In 2017, a team led by Laura Weirich sequenced DNA out of the hardened plaque still stuck to his tooth. Calcified plaque is a time capsule. It traps everything that goes through your mouth and then fossilizes around it. And in this plaque, they found two things that weren't in any of the Neanderthals they tested. The first was poplar. Poplar bark contains salicylic acid, which is the active ingredient in aspirin. It's a painkiller and an anti-inflammatory, and it works. The second was Penicillium mold, the genus that penicillin comes from. This is a man with an infected tooth, invisible, measurable pain, more than 40,000 years before anyone would isolate an antibiotic, and his teeth are coated in the residue of a pain-killing tree and an antibiotic mold. I want to be honest about this because the researchers were. Finding mold in someone's plaque doesn't prove he knew about what it did. He may have eaten spoiled vegetation. That's the careful reading, and it's a fair one. But the poplar is harder to explain away. The other Neanderthals from the same period didn't have it. He was the sick one, and he was the one chewing the tree that stops pain. Somewhere in there, someone had worked out this bark helps, and that knowledge was old enough by then that a Neanderthal with a rotting tooth already knew where to find it. Which brings us to the thing they finally did about it, and it's worse than you are imagining. At the Neolithic site in Pakistan called Mehergarh, in a graveyard used between roughly 7,500 and 9,000 years ago, archaeologists found 11 molars with holes drilled into them. Not chipped, not cracked, drilled, clean circular holes between 1 and 3 millimeters wide, up to 3.5 millimeters deep, with concentric ridges still visible on the inside walls from the rotation of the tool. 9 different people, 4 women, 2 men, 3 unidentified, ranging from about 20 years old to over 40. All of the holes were in molars, deep at the back of the mouth, where nobody can see them. So this wasn't decoration. Some of the teeth had decay right next to the hole. This was treatment. The researchers worked out how it was done, and the answer is that these people already had the technology. Mehergarh was a bead-making settlement. They had flint drill tips mounted on bow drills, a bow strung around a spindle so that drawing it back and forth spins the bit at high speed. Standard equipment of boring holes through stone beads. Somebody looked at that tool and thought about a tooth. The team built a replica and tested it. A flint poured drill goes through human tooth animal in under a minute. Under a minute, which sounds fast until you remember there was no anesthetic, not a numbing agent, no alcohol, nothing. Somebody sat down, opened their mouth, and let another person drive a spinning flint point into a live nerve. And here's how we know they weren't corpses being modified after death. The bone and the tooth around those holes show healing. They got up afterward. They ate afterward. They lived, some of them, for years. This is the oldest known dentistry on earth and it worked. But think about that room, how that room actually was. To do this, you need someone with the skill to hold the drill. You almost certainly need 2 or 3 other people holding the patient still, because nobody stays still for that voluntarily. You need somebody who knows which tooth and how deep and when to stop, and who has done it enough times to be worth trusting. And you need the person in the chair who is in so much pain that letting their neighbors pin them down and drill it into their skull is the better option. Somebody 9,000 years ago was the person people came to, not a doctor. There was no such word, just the one who was good at it and who was willing to do a thing to you that hurt enormously because it was the only way to make the hurting stop. There was a strange ending to this. At Mehergarh, the drilled teeth stopped. About 6,500 years ago, they vanished from the record. The practice was used for something like 1500 years across generations, and then it was gone. Nobody knows why. The knowledge existed and then it didn't. The human beings went back to just enduring it for another few thousand years. That's the part I keep thinking about. Not the drill, the forgetting, because everything we know now had to do like that. It's held by a small number of people who learned it from someone and then only survives as long as it keeps getting handed forward. 1500 years of somebody teaching somebody else how to stop a person's pain, and it still ended. Your ancestors could not fix most of what went wrong with them, but somewhere back there, one of them sat with a person who was in agony and did the only thing anyone knew how to do. That's older than farming. It's older than writing. It might be older than us. The first medicine wasn't a drug or a tool. It was another person deciding your pain was worth doing something about. If you want more of these, subscribe. I put one every week. And tell me in the comments, would you have let them do it on you? Flint drill, no painkillers, there's people holding you down, or would you have taken your chances with the tooth? Next one's not a lighter. It's about what ancient humans did for fun, and the answer involves a lot more gambling than you'd expect.